One of the biggest challenges writers often face is marketing themselves and their work. Most of us feel a sense of awkwardness and even embarrassment about promoting ourselves. I had a 20-year marketing career before I became an author, and I found that marketing my work was one of the hardest things I've ever done, until I learned the secret that changed my approach and how I felt about marketing my own work. So in today's talk, I'm going to talk about the secret that changed my perspective and that can change yours as well, why I created this talk for you, the 4 most important things you can do to market your work, and then talk about a few specific strategies. So, the secret to marketing your work. I'm going to give it to you right up front. The secret is that it's not about you. It's about your reader and what your work can do for that reader. They aren't buying your book after all. They're never buying the book. They are buying the transformation that your book delivers. The problem that you help solve, the knowledge that you share, or even the escape or entertainment that you're providing. So why do we as writers write and create? Why do we create? It's because we have something to say and something that we want to share. And we want people to read it. We dream of having a bestseller because that means that a lot of people are reading what we created. We want people to buy our books because we want people to read our books. But you know what? Books don't sell themselves. If you go into a bookstore and you see lots and lots of books, they are not selling themselves. Usually we go in there because we know what we're looking for, or we might browse. But the bottom line is people go into bookstores to buy something, it's because they know about it. So if we want people to buy our books, we have to market them. There are thousands of great books sitting undiscovered in the bookstore. We know that. In the bookstore, the App Store, Amazon, thousands and thousands of great books undiscovered. So if you think about marketing as being on a hunt for readers, as looking for readers, then that kind of changes your perspective a little bit. And remember, it's not about your book, it's about what your book can do for the reader. On that note, let's back up a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. My name's Karen Robertson, and before I started writing and publishing, I had a 19-year career in marketing. I worked with some of the best agencies and companies and brands. These are just a few of the companies that I've worked with. I started writing interactive stories in 2007. At that time, my sons were 6 and 9 years old, and I was really struggling to get them to read for fun. As it turns out, they were both dyslexic, but I didn't know that at the time, and that's a whole other story. Now, one night, I literally had a dream about a new kind of book, where each time you turn the page, you had to physically do something to move that story forward. I wound up writing and publishing a book called Treasure Kai and the Lost Gold of Shark Island. It's a treasure hunt adventure story that uses little toys as clues to finding a gold treasure. And there are treasure chests, 8 little 3-dimensional plastic treasure chests that are on the book itself where those toys were hidden. I self-published this book because it was a very alternative format. I wanted speed to market, but also I wanted to make sure I created something that was top quality. So I worked with a number of professionals to create this book. In 2010, I was about to reprint this first book and print the second one in the series, but I was really feeling frustrated because I'm American, but I was living in Australia at the time, and I felt really frustrated because I was really limited to marketing this book in the country where I was living, in Australia, because the cost of shipping was really high to send it overseas. But then something happened. My youngest son picked up an iPad for the first time, and he actually chose storybook apps over game apps. So once I picked myself up off the floor, because that was a real shock, I decided to create an app. I decided to publish my book as an app instead of reprinting it. And I worked with a friend to create this book as an app. It launched in February 2011, and what was so neat about having a book app was all of a sudden I had access to a global market. So remember my frustration about only selling my books in Australia? That changed when my book became an app. Now the other thing that happened was I was one of the first authors in Australia to publish my book as an app, so I started being asked to write and speak about how I did it. But I found that articles and speeches barely scratched the surface of what people needed to know. So I wrote an ebook called Author's Guide to Book Apps. And I went on to write 5 books about this subject of apps and marketing apps. So I share this with you so you can see that I've had 3 different types of publishing marketing challenges. I've had a children's book that was printed and was in Australia. I had children's book apps that were available to sell worldwide, and I had nonfiction, ebooks, and training on how to create and market a book app. That secret for shameless self-promotion has been the same for all 3. It's not about me, it's always about the reader. If I don't tell the reader what I have, then that reader can't access the transformation that my work could provide for them. Whether or not they choose that transformation is their choice. So I'm committed to letting them know about what I offer, but I'm not attached to whether or not they choose it. My job is just to share. So let's look at how I've had experience with this with each of those 3 types of publishing: the printed book, the book apps, and the expert ebooks. So while I was in production on the Treasure Kai printed book, I did a lot of studying on book marketing, because we were in production for 18 months. That's how long it took to publish that book. So I went to the Independent Book Publishers Association, Publishing University. I went to the Megabook Marketing University, and I even went to Book Expo. When I would show people my book, people said to me, "Oh my gosh, your book will sell itself. It's got treasure chests on it, it's got toys, it's a no-brainer." So here I was, optimistic, in the warehouse with all my little books, optimistic that my book would sell itself. But guess what? It didn't sell itself. So it was really interesting because I found it so confronting once I actually had these books. While I'd found it really easy in my profession to market other products and services, I found the story changed when all of a sudden I was marketing my own work. I felt awkward and I felt embarrassed. And I began to worry, how am I going to sell these books? It was very, very confronting. But then what happened was I reconnected with my why. What was my big why? Why did I write my book? I wrote my book and created this interactive reading experience with toys and treasure chests. I wrote it to inspire the reluctant reader because I couldn't get my kids to read. I wrote it to engage and inspire the reluctant reader. I even worked with speech pathologists and a literacy tutor on the language to make sure it was right, and they used it in sessions. So what happened was I sat there and I thought, okay, why did I write this book? It was to inspire the reluctant reader. So I thought, where do I find reluctant readers? I thought, well, there are a couple places. One is literacy tutoring and speech pathologists, and the other was schools. So then I started connecting. The first thing I did was I went to literacy tutors, and I showed them my book. I donated a book. I explained how I worked with a literacy tutor and a speech pathologist on the language. I showed them how it was being used by literacy tutors and speech pathologists. I offered them a book to use in their practice, and I also offered their books for sale and gave 10% back through their offices. And that felt really great because that was the whole reason I created this book. The other thing I did was I started doing school author visits in Australia. Now this was a real challenge because I was a first-time author, and of course there were a lot of authors out there who can do school visits. So what I did was I started with local teacher librarians in my area. I created gift baskets that included my book and treasures and all kinds of really neat things, and I hand-delivered them to the local librarians. I picked about 20 schools. So in that gift basket, I offered a free author visit. And the only thing I asked was that I would be able to sell my books through the school, which they allowed, and I would donate 10% of the sales back to the schools. By the way, if you ever do school visits, be sure you take order forms with you to the event. I could do a whole little session on school author visits, but I learned a lot through that. But this was the primary way that I sold my books. And I did sell them all. Now let's talk a little bit about book apps, because this was a different challenge. All of a sudden, instead of just being in Australia, which was a very physical sale, it was very one-on-one, it was in person, it was at events, marketing book apps opened up a whole different challenge because it was global. So I had to start over again. But I'd learned my lesson. So I thought, okay, what do I need to do? I need to connect. So what I did was I joined the kids app community early, before my book app was even out. I connected with the Moms with Apps and Parents with Apps community, the App Friday people, and on social media. I connected with reviewers like Digital Storytime. And this was in the early days of the industry, so people were very networked in, and they still are for the most part. I also started and participated in conversations on social media. I find LinkedIn groups is a terrific place to network. I did joint promotions on review sites with other similar themed apps. So we had a pirate theme, and we would have apps with curriculum themes, and we would have adventure themes. But I wasn't just promoting my book. We would promote a theme, an interactive reading around a theme, and that would create excitement in the industry. Then it wasn't just about me. It was about a theme. And always I would think to myself, how can I help? How can I help other people? When I was thinking about the conversations I was having, I came from a place of service. And what does my work give to somebody? Not buy my book or buy my app. As a result, we've sold the Treasure Kai book apps in nearly 100 countries, just about every day for over 3 years. Finally, I have all these ebooks that I sold as well. And again, I couldn't make it be about me. So what did I do? I started sharing content, free content, always thinking, how can I help? I wrote articles for SCBWI, articles for social media. I did video and radio interviews. I did a lot of speaking for local writing and publishing groups, and also online. I did lectures online internationally. So again, I just want to share with you, with each of these 3 types of publishing, when I would make it about me and I would think about selling books or book apps or ebooks, I would struggle. But as soon as I wouldn't make it about me and I would make it about the transformation I was giving, then there was a lot of freedom that came around that. I would have given anything to really understand this when I first started out. So, how do you make this shift? And then how do you market your book? So remember, if you don't tell someone what you have, then they cannot access that transformation your work provides them. There is a reason you started writing. There is a reason you created what you did. So you really, really need to get back in touch with what that reason was. But remember, it's their choice whether or not to accept that transformation that you're providing. So I like to say there are 4 C's, or the 4 most important things that you can do. The first one is committing to your why. The second one is connecting with others. The third is having conversations with people and think in terms of how can I help. And the last one is to collaborate. Let's talk a little bit about each. Okay, so this first one we've spent some time on, connecting with your why. Why did you write? Why did you create? What transformation do you deliver? And it can be entertainment. Then connect with your reader where they are. Try to think, who's your ideal reader? Who's the person that you help the most with your work? How do they spend their time? What media do they use? What matters to them? Who else cares about this topic that you can join forces with? Are there stores or organizations or even toys that care about your topic as well? Reach out and connect via social media, events, and even publications. Then connect with your colleagues, other children's writers, reviewers, agents, publishers, and the media. Connect with them on social media. It's a great place to do it. Converse, don't sell. Have conversations around the topic that is your why. Write articles, ask questions, post surveys, guest speak. Always think, how can I help? But remember, it's around your topic and your transformation. It's not buy my book. And then collaborate. Don't compete. This is something that's really interesting that can be quite liberating when you get this, is that your colleagues are not your competitors. When you look at your colleagues as people you collaborate with, there are all kinds of things that open up to you. For example, if there are a number of people who have written about your topic, then consider having a joint promotion themed around your topic and then bringing all of your works together and highlighting the strengths of all of them. For example, in Australia, we would do an annual event called an author afternoon tea for the area that we lived in. We would bring together about 20 children's writers, and we would host a number of different schools, and they would send students to this author afternoon tea where each authors would host a table and they would talk about their work, and it was a really neat collaborative effort. And then we would sell books, and it would get kids excited about meeting authors, real authors. We would do joint promotions, like I said, around a theme, And then there's one other really interesting example of a collaboration, and that is the new organization called the Book App Alliance. That's bookappalliance.com, and it's an industry organization for the innovative authors of interactive books for kids. And I definitely recommend that you check that out. And what we do is we come together to promote a general awareness and understanding of what book apps are amongst teachers and parents and even the industry itself. Now let's talk a little bit about marketing tactics you can use. You can do hours on a presentation on this. So I just want to touch base on a few marketing tactics that you can use bearing these 4 C's in mind. The first one's your website, because that's where you can really showcase your big why, and you can include your content and your articles and your blogs around your big why. Social media conversations, again, are terrific marketing tactics. Doing events, both online and offline, around a theme and around your big why. Doing joint ventures or joint promotions with your colleagues that you collaborate with, not your competitors. And also sponsorship. So if there is an industry organization who is doing something around your big why and you would like to sponsor what they're doing, then that might be a great way for you to do something. You could even offer copies of your book either for free or for sale for things to raise awareness. So, there are a number of different ways you can use these different marketing tactics, but keep those 4 C's in mind. So, in summary, the secret to shameless self-promotion is don't be embarrassed. When you reconnect with your why, it transforms the way you think about promoting your work. It's not about you, it's about them. It's about the transformation your work delivers. If you don't tell people what you have, you take away their opportunity to choose. So remember, you're doing them a disservice if you don't share what you've done. Connect, converse, don't sell, and collaborate. Remember your big why.